This is going to be a quick guide for Unholy Death Knight in the War Within. We're going with Rider of the Apocalypse for both Raiding and Mythic Plus, which, oh my god, is one of my favourite hero talents of all. How does it work? Basically, you're going to be passively summoning one of the 4 horsemen, as you can see here, and sometimes we're going to summon all 4 of them, and they're going to increase our combat efficiency. So the set bonus as well is very simple for us in Unholy this season. Your minions deal more damage. When you summon a minion, your haste is increased. Cool. Looking at the rotation then, we're going to make sure, of course, we've got our raised dead up at all times. We're starting off with the raid single target rotation here. And then if the target is below 35% health, use Soul Reaper. It'll do damage. If they're below 35% health, it will then explode. Keep up Death Coil for a few reasons. One is for this here, Death Rot. Shadow damage taken from us is increased, and that will stack, and that will become from your Death Coil. But mainly we're using it here for the proc that you can see right now, which is called Sudden Doom. Your auto attacks have a chance to make your next Death Coil cost less runic power and critically strike. We then have this here, Harbinger of Doom, where Sudden Doom triggers more often, can accumulate 2 charges and increases the damage of your next Death Coil or Epidemic by 10%, 20%. 10%, 20%? By 20%, yeah, for Death Coil. So basically, when you get the proc, it can actually then increase the damage of your Death Coils. After that, use Outbreak to keep up the Virulent Plague. That's a disease that you can put on your enemy. If you don't know how Unholy works, basically we use Festering Strike, and it's going to make festering wounds on the target. We then actually burst them with Scourge Strike, but in this spec it's replaced with Clawing Shadows, and that's going to burst those wounds, which we'll be using here. After that, we can use Festering Strike to get those wounds up, and there's one of the 4 horsemen. Literally, these hero talents are insane. We're using Death Coil here, again, to get up Death Rot. Specifically, it's here in the rotation to keep up Death Rot, and also with Rotten Touch, which I'll explain in a minute. And here we're using it as a higher priority when we get a proc. So Rotten Touch actually helps put your abilities together. Sudden Doom causes your next Death Coil to increase your Clawing Shadows damage against the target. So when we use Death Coil, we're going to get Rotten Touch on the target, which will increase the damage of Clawing Shadows. So you get a proc, it puts Death Rot on there. It's then going to increase the damage of Clawing Shadows, keep up Virulent Plague with Outbreak. And then we're just using Clawing Shadows and Death Coil here. Really, if there's hardly any Festering Wounds on there, and we're going to burst them. And then we've got Death Coil at the end, again, just to literally spend any excess runic power that we have. So we do have runic power here building up throughout the rotation. We're going to be spending it with Death Coil. And then we have our Unholy Runes. We have our cooldowns, Abomination Limb, Apocalypse, Dark Transformation, Unholy Assault, and Raise Abomination. You can use them in left to right in that order, really in single target, and it doesn't make too much difference. When it gets a bit more important is when we go into Mythic Plus or AoE rotation, which I'll show you now. A few things are changing. We don't have Clawing Shadows, we're just using Scourge Strike, and we now have Defile, Vile Contagion, and we're using Epidemic rather than Death Coil. So always keep your raised dead up, as usual, like in single target. And then we're going to use our Scourge Strike to add a buff to ourselves called Plague Bringer. Your disease damage occurs much more quickly, and we're going to keep that up at all times. Specifically, we're going through this rotation here as a build phase, and then we have a burst phase. So keep up Scourge Strike to keep up that buff, Plague Bringer. Then we're going to use our Raise Abomination. Then we're going to use our Abomination Limb. Then Apocalypse, and then Dark Transformation. We're then going to use Epidemic if we get Sudden Doom procs. Then we're going to use Festering Strike, and then Unholy Assault. Then use Vile Contagion on the target that has the highest amount of Festering Wounds, because what it's going to do is spread it to other enemies nearby, but it's going to spread the amount that you have on your current target. So if you use it on a target of only 1, it's going to spread 1 to everyone. If you spread it with a target with 5, it's going to spread 5 to everyone. Hence why we use it there. So we build up all of those Festering Wounds, and then boom, spread them around. If we've got under 2 runes, we're going to quickly use Epidemic, and then we're going to put Defile down, which is this big dirty mess, which brings us into the burst phase. Defile the targeted ground, doing shadow damage to all enemies. When you remain within your Defile, your Scourge Strike will hit 7 enemies near the target. So we then keep using our Scourge Strike to keep up Plaguebringer buff, still put up your Virulent Plague, use Epidemic if you get a proc, use Scourge Strike, and then Epidemic, etc., as you would kind of above, depending on how many Festering Wounds you've got. And that pretty much, in this order, is going to be the AoE rotation once you're in your Defile. So use all of these in this order, basically building up all your Festering Runes and diseases, boom, spread them around on the target with the highest amount, and then use Defile and go into the burst phase with Defile. Once Defile falls off, you then go back into this simpler rotation, and that is AoE. So it is quite different in the AoE versus single target rotation, but that is the rotation for Unholy Death Knight in the War Within. If that was a bit much for you or too quick, then check out the link in the pinned comment or my description for my full in-depth rotation guide, well, in fact, whole guide, including everything you need to know for Unholy Death Knight in the War Within. And if you would like my LVI profiles, not shown here, you'd like macros for individual specs to make your life easier, or to get VIP support in Discord in a private channel where only Patreons can ask questions, etc., then do join my Patreon, and it also helps support the channel, which I really appreciate. If you're looking for other quick guides, check out this playlist here.